Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Energy Development Corporation's earnings call on its first 9 months 2016 financial and operating results. Today's conference is being recorded. I would now like to turn the conference over to Mr. Ratio. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to EDC's conference call to discuss the financial operating results for the first 9 months of 2016. As a reminder, materials for today's call has already been posted in the Investor Relations page of the company website. We have likewise subscribed to a playback of this call from our service provider, PGI. The corresponding passcodes will be made available only upon request by all concerned from EDC Investor Relations. Before handing over the floor to the next speaker, I would like to remind everyone that comments made for the call's duration may include forward-looking statements that are based on current expectations and as such are subject to a variety of risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to materially differ from current expectations. Participating in today's call are the following: our CFO, Mr. Nestor Vasay, VP for Corporate Finance, Erwin Abante, Manager for Corporate Finance, Lisa Po, AVP for Legal, Regulatory, and Business Development, First Gen, Carlo Vega, Senior Technical Advisor, Mr. Paul Cerulo, and our AVP Controller, Ms. Maribel Manlapas. I will now turn over the floor to Mr. Nestor Vasay for a brief introduction.
Thank you, Boy. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In the first 3 quarters of 2016, there were 4 major factors that affected the company's financial results. First one is the higher revenue of 60 million, and this is brought about by higher energy sales of Palimpinong and Tongonan, FG Hydro, and Burgos Wind. Second is the drop in operating expenses, and this is mainly due to a tighter implementation of cost management measures, together with the curtailment of discretionary expenses for business-related activities and foreign travel expenses. Third is the higher insurance proceeds, owing largely to insurance collections for Bacman Unit 2. So for year-to-date September 2016, insurance proceeds ran at 1,492,000,000 versus the 826 million for the same period in 2015. And the last item relates to arbitration proceedings between EDC's wholly owned subsidiary Bacman Geothermal Inc. and its contractor Weir. EDC received proceeds from Weir on contract for works with a net amount of 120 million pesos and reimbursement of legal expenses with a net amount of 50 million. I will now turn over the floor to Lisa to discuss the financial results in greater detail.
Thank you, Nestor. On slide 6, this shows a summary of our financial performance for the first 9 months of the year. We have a separate discussion on the major drivers in the succeeding slides. Consolidated net revenues was 25.4 billion this year, as compared to the 25.3 billion in same period of 2015. EBITDA increased 7% from 14.4 billion in 2015 to 13.3 billion in 2016. Net income stood at 7.3 billion for the first 9 months of the year, up 21% from the 6.1 billion of the same period last year. Consolidated recurring net income attributable to equity holders of the parent stood at 7.0 billion pesos in the first 3 quarters of 2016, marginally higher by 54 million from the same period last year. In the next slide, the consolidated revenues increased by 0.2% from 25.3 billion in the first 3 quarters of 2015 to 25.4 billion in 2016, mainly due to the following. First, increase in sales volume from FG Hydro, Tongonan, and Burgos Wind post-curtailment. Second, as for the GCGI plants, Palimpinon and Tongonan's revenue increased by 6.3% due mainly to higher sales volume. The average GCGI tariff increased from 5 pesos and 08 centavos per kilowatt-hour to 5 pesos and 13 centavos per kilowatt-hour, mainly due to the escalation factor embedded into the contracts. Third, Mindanao 1 and 2 increased 7.5% following a 4% increase in volume and increase in tariff from 3 pesos per kilowatt-hour to 3 pesos and 10 centavos per kilowatt-hour in year-to-date third quarter 2016, considering movement in the peso to dollar exchange rate. These were offset by lower reported revenues from plants with significant exposure to the electricity spot market, as in the Bacman plant, which declined by 27%, and the Sulo Power Plant, which declined by 30%. From our newly commissioned capacities, Burgos Solar contributed to a 36 million peso increase in revenue. Slide 8 summarizes the movement of the operating expenses for the first 9 months of 2016. Operating expenses for the given period decreased by 5% or 691 million pesos with the following major contributors. 900 million pesos purchased services and utilities, parts and supplies attributable to decrease in civil works, power plant O&M and lower well workovers. And 224 million mainly on parts and supplies issued related to FCRS O&M, lower typhoon rehab expense, together with the curtailment of discretionary expenses for business-related meetings and foreign travel expenses. In the following slides, I will be discussing the specific performance of each plant of the company. Slide 9 is on Unified Leyte. Revenues went up by around 25 million pesos due to 4% increase in tariff. This is despite a reduction in net sales volume after elimination of ULGEI's cost of strips of energy, due primarily to outages in Malitbog. Meanwhile, average tariff increased considering movement in peso to dollar exchange rate. Net income decreased by about 566 million pesos, mainly due to lower insurance proceeds for year-to-date September 2016 versus the same period in 2015. Slide 10 is about our Palimpinon plant. Palimpinon's revenue increased 5% from 5 billion in year-to-date September 2015 to 5.2 billion in year-to-date September 2016 due to increase in volume and higher tariff. Volume increased to compensate for the effects of Tongonan's Unit 3 shutdown early this year. Slide 11 is about our Tongonan plant. Revenues went up by 9% due to higher sales volume from better performance of Unit 2 following a 4-month unplanned outage the previous year. Net income improved 44% with lower operating and interest expenses. Results of the Bacman plant is shown in slide 12. Revenues are down by 27%, mainly due to tariff prices, which dropped from 4 peso and 33 centavos per kilowatt-hour in 2015 to 3 pesos and 05 centavos per kilowatt-hour this year. The drop in the operating income was offset by the collection of insurance proceeds covering Unit 2 machinery breakdown, amounting to about 1.2 billion pesos. Slide 13 is about Mindanao. Revenues increased in first 9 months of 2016 from 1.7 billion to 1.8 billion due to combined effects of the 3.4% escalation on the tariff price and a 4% increase in energy sales. Consequently, net income increased by 42%, primarily due to higher revenues and higher derivative gains, partially offset by higher finance charges and forex loss on long-term loans. On slide 14 is our Nasulo plant. Revenues dropped by 330 million pesos in year-to-date September 2016, mainly due to the 26% reduction in tariff prices following the drop in WESM prices, as most of its energy sales are sold to the spot market. Net income dropped by 433 million due to the lower revenue and higher interest expense. On slide 15 shows the performance of the Unified Leyte strips of energy. Net loss increased by 138 million pesos on account of higher operating expenses, as the cost of energy strips that we pay to PISAM is more than the average selling market price. This is despite the increase in revenues, where about 52% are contracted. Slide 16 is about SG Hydro. Net income from the Pantabangan Masiwais plant increased 54% from 546 million in year-to-date September 2015 to 841 million in 2016, with higher revenues despite higher income tax. Revenues increased from 1.6 billion in first three quarters of 2015 to 1.9 billion in same period this year due to the 20% increase in volume and increase in average tariff rate from 4 pesos and 34 centavos per kilowatt-hour to 4 pesos and 45 centavos per kilowatt-hour. Volume increased as the plant had higher water levels and higher water discharge from the National Irrigation Administration this period. On slide 17 is our Burgos Wind plant. Revenues increased by 199 million pesos as a result of uncurtailed output in year-to-date September 2016. Net loss for Burgos Wind is expected due to the nature of the wind profile in northern region of the Philippines, where 80% of the annual wind generation is dispatched during the first quarter and the fourth quarter. As the Burgos Wind project is designed to take advantage of this wind profile, revenues and income are expected to pick up towards the end of the year. This is also attributable to higher finance charges and unrealized FX losses. On slide 18 is our Burgos Solar plant. Net income in year-to-date September 2016 amounted to 11 million pesos following the declaration of commercial operations by Burgos Solar 2 early this year, which increased the revenues by 36 million pesos. On slide 19, consolidated recurring net income for year-to-date September increased by 2% or 168 million from same period last year. The movement in the recurring net income is mainly due to the following: higher income from Palinpinon Tongonan, contributing 903 million, and FG Hydro contributing 283 million, offset by lower contributions from plants with high exposure to spot market, such as Bacman, which had an opportunity loss of 925 million, and Nasulo of 386 million. In terms of our cash flow, cash generated from operations during the first 9 months of the year stood at 13.6 billion pesos. The cash generated were used primarily for debt service requirements, maintenance capex, and cash dividends. As for our consolidated financial ratios, current ratio was lower due to higher current liabilities mainly from reclass of the 3.5 billion peso bond to mature in December 2016 and the 4.7 billion to mature in 2017. Debt to equity improved due to a higher equity increase than the higher debt balance brought about by the 5 billion peso BGI loan. Meanwhile, net debt to EBITDA decreased due to a higher EBITDA increase of 9% versus the 1% increase in debt. I will now turn you over to Carlo Vega, who will be presenting the next slide.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just to proceed with the discussions on the market. Slide 23, you will see on slide 23 the status of Bacman Geothermal's contracting activity. This is primarily to address the financial impact that my colleague Lisa explained a while ago. Bacman and Nasulo are two of our plants with the highest amount of spot market exposure, and so for the whole year, the team was busy trying to get contracts to cover this exposure. And as you can see on the slide, the 94.8 megawatts of exposed capacity to the spot market has already been covered with contracts from both electric cooperatives and contestable market and contestable customers. The breakdown of which is 70 megawatts from electric cooperatives. This is composed of 4 electric cooperatives, while 21.5 megawatts from contestable customers, composed of 12 customers with smaller contracted demand per customer. As you can see, the remaining uncontracted portion is 3.3 megawatts, and the amount of potential customers being considered today is more than enough to cover the 3.3 megawatts. We don't have a slide for Nasulu, but the same is true. By the end of this year, we expect Nasulu to be fully contracted. But the only difference is that Nasulu will be contracted with an ancillary service contract to cover the full 49 megawatts of its capacity. I think moving forward, we wanted to show the next slide on slide 24, which discusses the timeline on retail competition and open access. And this is important for plants under EDC's portfolio, mainly because this takes away the regulatory risk, which was the main reason why Bacman suddenly became uncontracted this year. If you recall, Meralco and BGI entered into a contract and it filed its application to the ERC. Unfortunately, after a year and a half, nothing has been given, no approval from the regulator was given, and as such resulted to Bacman being exposed significantly to the spot market. This timeline on your screen right now will tell you that if we focus our contracting activities for the next 2 to 3 years, or even for the long term to contracting contestable customers, we will do away with the regulatory lag or the risk of not getting any approvals from the regulator. This is actually saying that by December 26, the original timeline of the regulator is that contestable customers, meaning to say customers with 1 megawatt and up, will be allowed to choose their own supplier and will not be required to get from their existing distribution utility. Further to that, we wanted to show the next slide that shows the government's direction towards planning for the energy future of the industry. And in a nutshell, what the 9-point agenda is actually saying is that it will favor and it should favor indigenous and renewable sources of power, considering that aside from cost, the main agenda will now be about energy security, energy access, again heavily favoring indigenous and renewable sources of power. So again, that's the macro view of the industry, together with some updates on our specific business units which reported some financial. I'll pass you on to the next speaker.
Hi, good afternoon. I'll be covering the technical. This is Paul Cerullo. We'll begin on slide 26. EDC's power plants are at the midlife stage and require substantial capex for improved reliability. On this slide, what you can see is the different power plants, and our goal is to move them into the lower left-hand corner at low unplanned outage factor and early life cycle. We reset the life cycle clock by investing capex and doing life cycle extensions through retrofits and rehabilitations. So last year we completed the units at Bacman, and the goal this year is, what we've already started on is Tungonan, which is the upper right-hand circle or ball, and to move that into the far left lower corner. We're involved right now in a major rehabilitation on Unit 1, which is underway now with the original equipment manufacturer, Mitsubishi, and a complete revamp of that unit, including an increase in capacity. The next one after Tungonan will be Upper Mejia, which is at the center of the slide, which we've also started on as well in terms of rehabilitation of the steam turbines and the BOP. Next, slide 27. EDC remains committed to reducing our unplanned outage factor to below 5% by addressing fleet-wide life cycle reliability issues, as what I've mentioned. On the right-hand side, I'll just go through the various plants. So at Bacman, the Unit 3 Kawayan is operating normally now following the warranty inspection we completed earlier this year, and the other two 60 megawatt units, they completed their rehabilitation last year, and they've been operating at a very high reliability rate since we completed that work. The Upper Mejia units, which consist of 420 megawatt units, we've already completed the first of the four with a complete new steam path, new rotor and diaphragms of improved metallurgy. We're using 12 chrome on the rotor forging now. We've already received, the second of the four was recently shipped from the U.S. and it should be arriving in the Philippines shortly. That will be installed in the first quarter of next year, and then we'll continue on with the third, also in 2017, the third of the four rotors, and the fourth one will be upgraded and rehabilitated in 2018. The next unit, or the next plant, is the 112.5 megawatt Tungonan. As I mentioned before, we're in an outage right now, in a planned outage on the first of the three units. Those units will be improved by 10% in output and also significant improvement in efficiency. The second unit will follow Q1 of 17, and the third unit end of Q1, beginning of Q2. The next plant is the Mindanao plant. These units have been operating very reliably, but there's a concern on one of the rotors, one of the stators, so we purchased a new OEM stator, and it's already arrived in the Philippines. Still operating reliably, but this was done just to make sure there wouldn't be any unexpected failure because of some problems in one of the stators. And then in the Leyte optimization plants for both the Mahanagdong topping and Tungonan topping, we're in the process of purchasing new rotors and diaphragms for those units, which have had a very high rate of unplanned outage in previous years. And the Malitbog bottoming cycle, we're in the process this year, right now, of ordering a new rotor from the OEM for that unit. So the next slide, 28, attaining generation targets requires successful implementation of both equipment reliability upgrading and typhoon resiliency initiatives. We completed the vast majority of all the typhoon proofing on the cooling towers and on the buildings. So this is just a small amount of work that will move into 2017. The lion's share of it, well over 95% of it's already finished. On slide 29, EDC's completed the typhoon proofing on 65 of 68 cooling tower cells in the typhoon-prone sites at Bacman and Leyte. These were the ones which were hit in 2013 Q4 and 2014. So those are just about finished. Thank you.
Okay, the presentation has just concluded. Operator, we can now entertain questions from among those who have dialed in.
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 on your telephone keypad. Please ensure the mute button on your telephone is switched off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. If you find your question has been answered, you may remove yourself from the queue by pressing *2. Again, please press *1 to ask a question. We'll take the first question from AJ Mirshandani from JP Morgan.
Yep, thank you so much for the presentation, gentlemen. Two questions from me. One was just to confirm specifically on Bacman. You have talked about the fact that a contract's already been signed, but you're still awaiting ERC approval. Can I just confirm when can we expect that to kick in? And can I also confirm that has, in terms of the existing contract, is it still therefore being priced at spot? Just want to confirm that, and therefore being booked in the third quarter largely on spot. The second question I had was just specifically on the Chevron assets being sold. Any comments or any updates from you specifically on your interest or inclination for those assets? That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so for the first question on yes, they have signed already these contracts and have already been filed, or we're just waiting for the first hearing date to be scheduled. If we base it on historical performance of the regulator, we expect the approval to be given to us by second quarter of next year, so March. In terms of the pricing, and it's publicly available, the average price that these contracts were closed at was at 3.8 pesos per kilowatt hour. If you compare this to the spot market, this is at least 80 centavos higher than what the spot market has been doing in the past.
And then for the second question, just to follow up on that, in case of Bacman, why have we seen such in terms of the net income that has kicked in, is it fair to say that a large chunk of that improvement Q on Q is because of the insurance within the quarter? Because you'll do present 9 months, but I'm just trying to clarify, because if I'm looking at the number, it seems almost 700 million was booked in the quarter for Bacman on the net income. So can I clarify a bulk of that within the quarter is related to the insurance?
Yeah, AJ, this is Boy. Yes, we confirm that a bulk of the improvement in net income is as a result of the insurance proceeds, because the net income being reported there is not recurring.
Okay, understand. And can I confirm how much was booked as insurance within the quarter itself?
Approximately 1.2 billion. I could give you the exact number by way of an email.
Okay. And just on the Chevron question?
Yeah, for the Chevron question, this is Ryan Velasco. I think previously we've confirmed that we were interested in looking at those assets by Chevron in Indonesia and the Philippines. So we had submitted our offer last month. We've partnered with Mitsui and a couple of other companies. We're currently waiting for the results from Chevron, and we'll be providing an update once we get the official results.
When is that expected?
That one we're waiting for guidance from the seller.
Okay, thank you.
As a reminder, to ask a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. We'll now take the next question from Jeremy Umul from RCBC Securities.
Hi, I would just like to ask that you mentioned that you've contracted some Bachmann capacity with contestable customers. Does this mean you already have an RES licensed unit, or are you still contracting it through First Gen RES?
Yes, we are still contracting it through First Gen Energy Solutions. However, just to explain a bit, our retail supply contracts, they all have an assignability clause that once Bachmann secures its own RES license, these will all be transferred to that RES license holder of Bachmann.
And when can we expect Bachmann to have its own license?
Well, the current rules, they're still accepting the applications. I think historically they've acted on applications at least by 6 months. So we expect by second half of next year, Bachmann will have its own RES license.
I see. Thank you.
Again, as a final reminder, to ask a question, please press star 1. As there are no further questions in the queue, I'd like to hand the call back over to your hosts for any additional closing remarks.
Okay, well, in closing, EDC thanks those who have taken their time and dialed in for today's call. Good afternoon.
Thank you. That will conclude today's conference call. Thank you for your participation, ladies and gentlemen. You may now disconnect.